Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. This is video number 2, and this time we're talking about table saw safety. In the last video, we went over personal protective equipment, or PPE. And if you missed that one, the link's going to be down in the description below. Let's get to it. Alright, here it is. This is my pride and joy. This is the Rigid TS3650 1.5 horsepower 10-inch Contractor table saw. This baby spins at 3,450 RPM. I've had this saw for over 10 years, and this is actually, I think, my third table saw that I've ever owned. So this table saw is actually a step up from the benchtop models you can find in most home improvement stores. I wouldn't call it like the Cadillac of table saws, I would call it like lower middle class. But everything that I'm telling you in this video can apply to all sorts of table saws. First things first, put on them safety glasses. Wait. Before you do anything, cut off the power to the table saw. You do not want this thing accidentally starting up when you're messing with the blade or you're making adjustments. Now, to determine the height of the blade, I always go off this little section right in between the blades. This is called the gullet. As long as I'm right around that area, I'm going to be good to go. Now, if your blade is too high, you can run into a couple of problems. First off, this is a whole lot more blade that's going to be embedded into this piece of wood. This can cause friction and overheating, which can then lead to burning on your material. Also, in this case, we've got almost 1.5 inches of extra blade coming up. That's pretty dangerous when you're working on the table saw. Now, having your blade too low can also be very, very dangerous. There's a chance that you're not going to be able to cut all the way through your material, and it can also lead to kickback. Time for story time. So, years and years ago, I was working at a maintenance shop in North Carolina. The boss man wanted to come in and do some freehand cuts on a 1/4 inch piece of plywood on the table saw. Now, when I'm saying freehand, I mean total 100% freehand. No miter gauge, no fence, no nothing. To make matters worse, the blade was barely coming out of the saw. Now, due to the fact that the piece of wood was so thin, it was causing it to warp a little bit. Because of the warp in the wood, the blade didn't cut all the way through it. This caused a major problem. So let me show you what was happening. The blade is sitting here spinning. The piece of wood is going over the top of it like this. And all of a sudden, it cups. It's warped right over the top of the blade. These teeth on the blade, right through here, grabbed onto that material and launched it right freaking here. Lefty was down for the count. We had to call the paramedics, and he ended up going to the hospital. Thankfully, the medical staff there was able to save Heavy D and the boys. A few years later, he was getting ready to leave the shop, and something that we did customarily, is that a word, we would make a plaque for the person that was leaving. I headed up the project, and I actually used that same piece of wood that brought him down, because I'm a dick. And that was funny. Now, back to the blade. For some reason, I don't know when this started or where this started, a lot of guys started actually spinning their blade around so that they could cut plastics and plexi and that sort of thing. For some reason or another, they think that the dull side is going to be cutting into the plastic better than the sharp side. I don't know how this works. Personally, I think it's a reckless and potentially dangerous thing to do. I would only use the side that is designed to cut to actually cut. Next up, let's talk about the fence. Now you might be thinking, duh, it's a fence. How am I going to screw up using the fence? Believe it or not, it's actually pretty easy. Let me show you. To begin, you got to make sure this thing is square. Next, we got to make sure you're standing on the proper side of the fence. This side, good. This side, bad. Being on the proper side of the fence will make sure that you have better control of your material and you can push it into the blade and into the fence a whole lot safer. Also, make sure that you're using push blocks or push stick to help better control your work. The orange, or in some cases red or yellow, that's the danger zone. You need to keep your hands away from that area. That's why having a push block and push sticks are super helpful and handy to have around. Do you need to go out and purchase stuff like this? Absolutely not. Does it help? Yeah. Is it something that you're going to need to have for the table saw? Absolutely. You can make one of these things relatively simply just out of a piece of plywood and a bandsaw. Don't have a bandsaw? Use a jigsaw. Do not use a hammer, a speed square, or an ice cold refreshing adult beverage. Only use things that are designed to do that job. As far as feed rate, don't feed it too fast, don't feed it too slow, feed it in there nice and easy. Constant, slow, smooth speed. And most of the time, table saws are used for ripping pieces of wood. That means it's going with the grain. You can, however, cross-cut a piece of wood. Now to do that, you're going to need one of these, a miter gauge. Your saw is going to come with one. Oh, God, sorry about that. Whew. Believe it or not, cross-cutting can actually be very, very dangerous if you do it wrong. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If you try to cross-cut something like this, what can happen is as you're pushing on the piece of wood, it can actually turn a little bit in this direction. If this wood starts to turn, it's going to get wedged between the fence, which probably is not going to move, and the blade. This is going to cause a potentially dangerous situation. When you start moving towards the back end of the cut and this is twisting out, these back teeth right here on the blade can actually grab a hold of this thing and launch it right at you. So to prevent this from happening, do what I do. Either clamp a block onto your fence or make a little jig like I did. That way this can drop right in place and I'm never going to lose it. Use this as your point of reference to get your measurements. So say for example that you need to cut something repeatedly at 7 inches, you bump it out right here at 7 inches, you clamp that in place. Now, you slide this back, index your piece of wood right on here, and then you could do your cut. Once you make that cut, this piece that you just made is going to be floating around in this area, and it's not going to come back and get you onto the miter gauge itself. First, make sure they're actually holding onto the handle. Next, you can use your other hands to hold onto the piece of wood and pull it back and tight up against the back of the miter gauge so it doesn't go anywhere when you go to make your cut. You can also make yourself what's considered a sacrificial fence or a miter gauge extension by just using a piece of wood and a couple of screws, putting it down and attaching it to the miter gauge. Tighten this thing up, and then this will actually stretch over the saw. Doing something like this is going to keep your hands far away from that blade and keep you nice and safe. One extra tip, if you decide to make an extension for your miter gauge, don't use the crappiest piece that you have laying around in your shop. Get something that is high quality. You don't want to get some effed up piece of wood that's going to be all warped and twisted and unstable, and then that could lead to injury. Or worse yet, it could ruin your saw. Something else to consider using is an outfeed roller table. Using an outfeed table or roller table like I have will help to make sure that when you're done cutting that piece of wood, it's not going to fall off the end of the saw. This will also help keep you a lot safer, because as soon as that wood starts to lift up a little bit because it's teetering down, what is the operator going to do? They're going to push down nice and hard and then try to keep pushing that in. You're adding a lot of undue stress onto the saw itself. Also, if you slip, that means that you could do a face plant right into the blade. So now let's talk about some optional accessories. Okay, so right here we have a side view of the table saw. Here's the tabletop, here's the blade and the teeth. Now this little shark fin coming up, this is actually called a writhing knife. A writhing knife can actually be super helpful. Let me explain. Here's a view looking down on a table saw. This is the piece of wood that you're cutting, and this is actually where the blade is. These are all the blade teeth. Now, what can happen every now and then is as you're making that cut, this end right here will start to pinch together. When that starts to happen, it holds like a vice grip on the back part of your blade. If it grabs the wood too tight, it can launch it right into your business. What a writhing knife does right here, this thing right there, and it keeps the wood from closing back down on itself. It can actually make your rip cuts a whole lot safer. Let's talk about overhead guards. We've got the table saw, here's the blade right here coming up, and then here's the overhead guard that may typically come with your saw. This back part right here that comes up out of the table that actually attaches it to the saw, that usually acts as a writhing knife. It also has, sometimes, these little grippers. These are called anti-kickback paws, or pawls, depending on who you talk to. As the piece of wood is going through, this lifts up a little bit. It's got a little hinge right here, or a little pivot point, and actually grabs onto your material, and it keeps the wood from coming back at you just in case something does pinch. The rest of this section right here is usually covered in some sort of plexiglass that hangs down, usually about like that, or sometimes it's actually sitting on top of the table itself. If you've seen any of my videos, you know that I've never used any kind of overhead guard or writhing knife. The reason I don't use them is because most of the time they're complete, utter pieces of shit. But there are a few aftermarket options that if you're willing to spend the money, they can be a definite good investment for you. Most DIY shows that show people using a table saw have the guards removed. They have a disclaimer normally at the beginning or end of the episode, or maybe while they're doing the work on the saw, saying that guards and safety precautions are ignored for clarity or something, so they can get better camera angles or better shots or whatever. I'll tell you right now, that is complete crap. Most of the guys on TV that are doing this type of stuff don't like using them either. It prevents you from doing quick blade changes. you can't do dados, and on some of them you can't slide the fence close enough to the blade to do the type of project cuts that you need to do. Here's my disclaimer. It is completely 100% on you to use your power tools correctly and safely. If you choose to remove the provided safety guards, that is all on you. Don't blame me and don't blame the manufacturer for something stupid that you did. As a matter of fact, a few years ago there was a push to make all table saws have the ability to sense human flesh. The machines have become aware! I know, it's kind of creepy, right? No, actually it's really cool technology. You remember those lamps from a long time ago? I don't know if they even still make them anymore, but every time you touch them, they turn on and off. It's the same type of technology. As soon as the blade senses human flesh, it's immediately stopped and then sucked beneath the table, thus saving your finger. Here's the thing. It ain't cheap. And as cool as that is, it would really price a lot of DIYers out of the market. I mean, personally, I can't afford a saw that does that. Granted, I can't afford to have any of my fingers replaced either. But I'm also very, very careful when I'm working, and I always know exactly where all 11 of my digits are. So don't be the guy that gets a safety sticker in their honor for something stupid that you decided to do. Again, so if you decide to use your table saw, or any tool for that matter, in a really stupid way, it's on you. Thanks for watching my table saw safety video. That was video number 2 in my safety series. Next time we're going to tackle the drill and the drill press. I'm going to show you ways on how to stay safe. Hopefully it won't be boring. Come on now, that was funny. And as always, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, whines, bitches, moans, and groans, let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, hope you guys liked that video. Gave it a big thumbs up. That's the best way to let me know that you just liked the video and that content you want to keep on seeing. Also, if you're not yet subscribed, make sure you hit that big red button, one of those sides down below. Then once you do that, that's going to be a real good way for you to know when I upload more content to this channel. If you have a question or there's something that you would like to see, let me know down in the comments below, or you can also send me a message. You can also check out the Project-woodworks fan page on Facebook, and I went ahead and linked a bunch of other cool places that you might want to check out as well. For you business owners, if you have a tool or product that you would like to send me so that I can do a totally unbiased video review, let me know down in the comments below. You can also send me a message. Again, thank you for watching. My name is Chris, and I'll see you in the next video.